Here we are going to talk about the National Association of Realtors, the NAR settlement. That was reached recently that you've probably seen in the news and kind of what that means for us in a financial planning, personal finance context. So if you missed the news, the NAR, National Association of Realtors, reached a $418 million settlement to a Kansas City jury, which was less than a quarter of the amount that they were actually ordering them to pay. But it is a huge deal because it's going to force changes coming now in July to the rules and the industry standards with which realtors are paid to buy and sell homes. Okay, so what happened at a basic level, the NAR was sued saying that they kept the 6% commission artificially high that is usually split between buyers and sellers agents, and that with Zillow and things, when people know the houses are for sale that we have now, there's practices called steering where buyers agents are steering their buyers towards houses that are being listed with an agent, right? Because there's a commission to split there. If I list my home for sale by owner and I don't have an agent, I'm more likely to try to find a buyer that isn't using an agent. So there's all kinds of agency issues there. But the bottom line is they are sued for for couple $2 billion, reached a settlement, and there's changes now coming in July. So the biggest change, I guess, the bottom line change that's going to affect you as a homeowner or you as a buyer is going to be those buyers are now going to have to enter a contract with their agent, that buyer's agent. So on the sell side, it isn't going to change as much because typically if I'm selling a house for, let's just say $300,000 and I have an agent that's listing that for me, that price isn't going to be paid by me, right? I'm paying that agent 3% of the sale price. It's going to be paid ultimately by the buyer's bank or the buyer's cash that is purchasing that house. But the buy side is going to have to now enter a contract with their agent saying, hey, I'm going to pay you 1% of the house price we buy. I'm going to pay you $10,000. It could be a percentage. It could be a flat fee. I think there's going to be all kinds of ranges of fees and ways that these agents are going to get paid. So some other implications for this. So some think that home prices may drop. Other stories, if you look in the news, say home prices aren't going to be affected at all. I can't imagine it's not going to affect home prices at all. When you think about these 6% of house sales going to agents, if that number shrinks to, let's just say 3% or 4.5% or something like that, you have to imagine home prices are maybe we're going to be listing our homes for a little bit less. Others say, hey, the buyer or the seller is just going to list their home for the same amount and take that difference. I am a free market thinker, right? I believe in economics and free markets. I think that ultimately the markets are going to decide the prices, and it makes sense to me that home prices might drop a little bit. I don't know. Buyer agent pricing is going to be completely negotiable. So this, I think really, really good buyer agents that have a niche or that have specialty or knowledge in certain areas are probably not going to change. They're probably still going to take that 3%. They're going to demand that 3% when they enter a contract with that buyer. And they can do that because they have the demand for their services and they have niche local expertise. If you're going to buy a house, I don't know if you might watch Selling Sunset. I'll use that as an example. If you're going to buy a house in OC or Sunset Boulevard, whatever, in LA, and it's $20 million, well, you probably need someone that has the connections, that knows that market, that is in that market all day, every day, right? Like the O Group on Selling Sunset. And that's very different than maybe if you're buying a house I live in Dayton, Ohio, and there's an agent here that maybe just got their license and maybe they're not quite worth that 3%. I don't know. So it's going to be completely negotiable. I think that means a lot of more onus is going to be on us as if we're a buyer, doing our research, making sure we know what we need and why we need it. Another implication is going to be steering. So that practice of agents directing buyers to more expensive houses with seller commissions, like that will be, I think, become less common as the industry becomes more transparent. Now, 25 years ago when there was no Zillow and all we could do is have that agent show us houses that are available, now we have Zillow. So if I hire an agent right now to help me look for a house, I can see the houses that are on the market. I can tell him which ones I want to go see. It's much more difficult, I think, for him to steer me to certain houses, and especially when we've entered a contract that he's going to get paid a certain way from me and maybe not from that seller's agent. So I think it becomes a little bit the steering practice or the agency problem there, where the buyer wants to find a house that has a really good seller offer. Like that will still happen, but I think it will be less common. Real estate agents may leave the profession is another implication. That's, I don't think, a good one. I think there's probably some sort of natural market equilibrium, that number of real estate agents that should probably be in the profession for the number of houses that are moving in any given year. I think really good real estate agents are completely worth the money and are super valuable. I think we saw a run up in the 2020, 2021 COVID housing boom, where many people were kind of just getting their license and maybe going and selling houses and making a lot of money just like the first month of being a realtor. So I think you're going to see less of that, but I think truly valuable, knowledgeable agents, again, niche, local expertise, they're going to maintain and become maybe even more valuable as some of the, agents that maybe don't have a niche expertise, don't have the valuable knowledge. Maybe they're not in the profession anymore. And then rolling the buyer's agent fee into the loan, I think will be possible. So there's stuff out there saying that this will potentially become common. So if I'm buying a house, instead of the seller's agent paying 3% or the seller that 6% getting split between the realtors, the seller's going to pay their guy 3%. I'm going to pay my guy or girl 3%, but I'm going to do that by rolling it into the loan. The VA loan doesn't currently allow for this. It doesn't allow to use the VA loan to pay for commission. So I would expect that to probably be changed with upcoming regulations. So the conclusion and what this means for us in like a personal finance, financial planning lens. I think if you're buying or selling a house in the future, you're just going to need to do a lot more research, especially if you're on that buy side. You're really going to have to think about the amount of service I need, where I'm buying that house. Just to throw examples out there, if I'm buying or selling like a spec home, it's brand new, there's nothing crazy going on with it. It's in a housing development that's being built out. It's a pretty simple deal. Maybe I need less of an agent than if I'm buying a house in a city that I don't live in, and it might be a little bit older and it's in an area that I don't know. That's where I really want that local expertise that I was talking about, that niche. I'll pay for it. I think you're going to see different. It isn't going to be this flat 3% in a new housing development with construction when we may or may not need an agent the whole time, and 3% in that scenario where we're buying across country and we're buying, maybe a 7-figure house and all these things. I think you're going to see that latter scenario demand a higher pay for that buyer's agent. Whereas if I'm buying into a brand new build and I kind of pick everything out, maybe I don't need to pay my agent 3%. So I think you're going to see some market equilibriums there. I do think liquidity is going to be ever more important as you're going into a house purchase or selling a house. I think if you have to pay an agent like $10,000 out of pocket, like that's another thing we're now having to come to the closing with, if that's their fee. So I think as you're going into a move, maybe like a PCS or a move of any type, having that liquidity is going to be ever more important. Real estate investing in the future, I don't know how this affects real estate investing. It may not touch prices at all. It may make prices go down. I'm not really sure. I think that remains to be seen. But I think this does have an effect on, the rental real estate market. And I think to tie this all together, the decisions you make when buying a home just matter so much more in 2024 than they did several years ago. I think if you roll back the clock several years ago, we had sub 3% mortgages. Money was really cheap. Realtors got paid 3% for the buyer's agent, 3% for the seller's agent. There wasn't a lot of negotiation. Now we're in a world where interest rates are moving very quickly. Mortgage rates are going from 5.5 all the way up to over 7, sometimes 8, depending on if you've locked in a mortgage in the last few months. And all of a sudden now these buyer's agent commissions are negotiable and we need to enter into a contract with them. I think the decisions that you make and the amount of thinking that needs to go in planning and calculations and research that needs to go into buying a home, that has gone up exponentially with these changes in the housing market, as well as this new NAR settlement. So I think the bottom line is if you're buying or selling a home anytime after mid-July, do your homework, do your research, understand this new rule, how it's going to affect you. Liquidity is your friend. And I think you're going to find that these decisions about housing are going to become more and more important for your financial situation. I hope this was helpful to kind of display what the NAR settlement is, how it affects us, and kind of some things to think about from a personal finance, financial planning perspective.